March 18th, 1993. As they walk the streets of Boulogne on their way to the Parc des Princes, the 46,000 PSG fans lucky enough to get tickets for the game don't know they're about to be part of a night that will make PSG history forever. It's the quarterfinal of the UEFA Cup, and PSG is about to have one of the biggest wins in its history against Real Madrid. Let me take you on a journey and tell you the story of that legendary night for PSG. In 1993, PSG was still a relatively new force in European football. The club had some successes and participated in a few European competitions in the 80s, but hadn't really made its mark, despite a legendary clash against Michel Platini's Juventus in 86. In 91, Canal bought the club, and PSG's history changed forever. Canal was intent on making PSG a stronghold of French and European football. To achieve this, they brought in some of the biggest names of the time: Ginola, Weah, Valdo, Lama. They all joined the club with expectations of turning it into a European powerhouse. After a strong first season, in which they finished third in the French league, PSG qualified for the UEFA Cup in 92-93. Back then, the UEFA Cup was far more prestigious than the European League that replaced it. Only the champion of each league qualified for the Champions League, so the UEFA Cup always featured many big names from European football. The competition was also organized with no group stage. It was knockouts from the get-go. The simplest mistake, one failed game, could see you out of the competition, making it high stakes from the start. For Real Madrid, being in the UEFA Cup was already somewhat disappointing. The club was fighting against a really strong Barcelona team led by Johan Cruyff, which was at its peak in the 91-92 and 92-93 season. Real, by contrast, was underperforming slightly, finishing second in La Liga, a few points behind Barcelona. They did have a strong squad with aging legends and new faces that would define Real Madrid and Spanish football in the 90s. Players like Butragueño were still there, along with Michel, striker Ivan Zamorano, and Spanish football legend Hierro, who would be one of Spain's main defenders throughout the decade. There was also a new kid you might recognize. Luis Enrique was part of the Real Madrid team at this point, still in the early stages of his career. The team was managed by Benito Floro, who was relatively unpopular as a coach and seen as a largely pragmatic, no-nonsense tactician. At this point, media and fans were slowly losing patience with Real Madrid, expecting success from them. The UEFA Cup was their last roadmap to achieve success that season, so there was significant pressure on them to deliver. On the other side, PSG had been bought by Canal the previous year and was at the beginning of a new chapter in its history. Canal brought over Champions League winning manager Artur Jorge, who was in his second season at the club. He was managing a squad strengthened by powerful recruits: George Weah and David Ginola up front, Valdo and Bravo in midfield, Ricardo and Rush in defense. Lama also joined the club at the beginning of the season to replace retiring goalkeeper Joel Batz. It was a new era for PSG. In France, they were battling a very dominant Marseille team that would go on to win the Champions League that same season. Marseille would also win the French league before being disqualified in a scandal involving cheating and paid-off players. They lost that title, which remained unattributed as PSG, who finished second, refused to claim it. The rivalry against Marseille was largely born in that era of football. Both teams played significant games to reach the UEFA Cup quarterfinals. Real Madrid had a challenging pass through the early rounds. In the first round, they drew 1-1 away to Romanian side Politehnica Timișoara, before securing a commanding 4-0 victory at home. The second round proved even more difficult against Soviet team Torpedo Moscow. They won the home leg 5-2, but then suffered a nervy 3-2 defeat in Moscow that still saw them through on aggregate. In the third round, they faced Dutch side Vitesse Arnhem, grinding out narrow 1-0 victories, both away and at home. Real Madrid scored many goals, but they weren't reassuring in defense, showing cracks going into the PSG game. PSG on their side started the competition with a tough fixture against Greek side PAOK, beating them on aggregate. Then we faced Napoli, who had lost Maradona and was rebuilding, but already had famous player Gianfranco Zola as one of its leading stars. We made it through with a strong result at the Parc des Princes, and then faced Belgium team Anderlecht, managing to dominate them. A big win, as Anderlecht was an experienced European team at the time. PSG in 92-93 was playing a very strong football. Coach Artur Jorge was known as a strong tactician, preferring a defensively solid game while using high tempo, overlapping fullbacks and intense midfield pressing. Madrid, on the other end, sat relatively deep in a structured 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1, preferring to hold the score, slow down the game pace, and rely on individual player quality to secure wins. In the first leg in Madrid, Real ended up winning 3-1 against PSG. PSG managed to get a goal back through Ginola from a Valdo corner on the 49th minute, which was amazing. But then Madrid, the more experienced team at home, had already taken control of the game, with goals from Butragueño in the 31st minute and Zamorano in the 34th. The game was sealed with a dramatic late penalty from Michel in the 90th minute. Initially stopped by Lama, but pushed back into the goal by Michel on the rebound. The general feeling was that PSG lacked experience at that level to truly compete. PSG had defensive lapses and lost control at the Bernabeu. The PSG team was also very differential to Real Madrid's history. There are images of PSG players visiting the Real Madrid museum the day before the game, generally amazed at having the chance to train and play at the Santiago Bernabeu stadium. It was a fresh team with many players who, even at the top level, didn't have much European experience. So for them, it was their first taste of a truly big European night. At the end of the game, some Real Madrid players actually mocked their Parisian counterparts, which would push the PSG player to give their all in the second game. That brings us to the night of March 18, 1993. The Parc des Princes was completely sold out, with an absolutely thunderous crowd. Pure magic was in the air, as fans strongly believed that their club could compete a memorable night and knock Real Madrid out of the UEFA Cup. PSG only needed 2 goals to go through, as the away goal scorer in Madrid would help them qualify. PSG started the game very strong, intent on showing their strengths to the Real Madrid players, who were slightly surprised by the atmosphere and intensity at the Parc des Princes. The first half was closely contested, but on the 31st minute, George Weah, assisted by Valdo from a corner, managed to score on one of PSG's strong points, set pieces. PSG was 1-0 up and the stadium went into a frenzy. Every fan truly believed that PSG could do it and push the team along. PSG was relatively dominating, imposing strong physicality on Real Madrid and trying to make the most of their advantage. The second half unfolded with PSG attackers struggling to score that crucial second goal, despite chances. The pressure ramped up progressively, creating the feeling that this was tight, very tight. It was a difficult game, balanced on a knife's edge. Then, on the 81st minute, in the closing moments of the game, came a moment of brilliance from the Parisian team. A beautiful piece of play between 3 players. Valdo passed to Daniel Bravo, who passed it back to Ginola, who volleyed it into the back of the Real Madrid goal. Paris took a 2-0 lead, the stadium erupted, and PSG was in position to qualify. Real Madrid didn't lose track though, started going forward into attack, and as a result, in the 88th minute, PSG had a breakaway. Valdo got on the ball after an assist from David Ginola, made a great feint that put a Real Madrid defender on his backside, and calmly slotted the ball into the Real Madrid goal for a 3-0 PSG lead. At that point, PSG had 9 of their 10 fingers qualified for the next round of the UEFA Cup. But there were still minutes to play. In the 90th plus 4th minute, Ivan Zamorano, at the end of a set piece and a header back from Francisco Villarroya, managed to get the ball past Bernard Lama to make it 3-1. Everything came undone for PSG. 3-1 would take both teams into extra time, and there was a feeling that the game had just been turned around, that Real Madrid, with their experience and European Cup history, would be able to take over and qualify in Paris. The Paris players never lost track of their goals, and never lost hope, continuing to go forward into attack. The referee kept the game going for a few more minutes, and in the 90th plus 6 minutes, PSG got a free kick from a foul by Zamorano, who had just scored for Real Madrid. Valdo was taking charge of that set piece. All of PSG's top players were up front, and substitute defender Antoine Comboiré also went forward. He made a run into the area, got the ball from Valdo, and knocked it past Real Madrid keeper to create an explosion at the Parc des Princes as PSG qualified. It was a defining moment in PSG fandom, and for every fan of the club. For PSG itself, it was probably the first big European moment in its history. A moment that allowed qualification for its first semi-final in a European competition. This set the tone for the next 5 or 6 years of PSG European brilliance, leading to 5 consecutive semi-finals in European competitions and 1 Cup Winners' Cup medal and victory in Brussels against Rapid Vienna. The winning scorer, Comboiré, gained the lifelong nickname Golden Helmet for his victorious header in that game. He went on to a successful career at PSG and returned years later as a coach for the first team. He's still to this day a respected coach in Ligue 1 and has managed several teams in the French league. Real Madrid's season largely unraveled following this game. They ended the season with no trophies, their coach was sacked soon after, and it was a turning point that showed they needed to rebuild their team and club from the ground up to be competitive in Spain and in Europe. For PSG, sadly, we went on to lose to Juventus in the semi-finals, with 3 goals scored by Roberto Baggio, who was the superstar of Italian football at that point. But the club definitely gained Europe's respect, and, as mentioned, went on to 5 consecutive semi-finals in Europe over the next few years. That game set the tone for our ambitions and showed that PSG had the talent, the squad, and the infrastructure to challenge even the biggest European clubs. For the fans, it was an emotional turning point, the real beginning of the Canal Plus era, and the first time they saw and believed that PSG had a story to write in Europe. For us today, what does this mean on the eve of another clash against Real Madrid? It's a real underdog comeback moment for the club. We weren't always a super club with deep pockets and a Champions League winning squad. For years, we were often the slight underdog against many teams, showing courage, passion, and drama in our games, building our reputation on the back of games like this. It's really an emblematic game of 90s football. Chaos on the pitch, passion, a packed stadium filled with excitement. Ultimately, it's a defining moment for French football in that era. It's the spirit that we've actually seen return under Luis Enrique. Surprisingly, Luis Enrique was on the losing Real Madrid side that night. He would go on years later to be on the losing Barcelona side against PSG as well. We tend to forget that when we say Luis Enrique was Barcelona's coach during the remontada, he was actually a Real Madrid player during PSG's first remontada. There's a longer history between our current coach and our club that many people don't remember. Finally, for PSG, the 92-93 season ended as one of the most legendary for the club. We reached the UEFA Cup semi-final, finished second in the French league, with Marseille disqualified ahead of us, and achieved a historic performance by winning the French Cup without conceding a single goal, something that hasn't been done that often in French football history. It's one of the defining moments of PSG history and French football history. I wanted to share it with you as we prepare for another potentially historic moment in the semi-final of the Club World Cup, against Real Madrid again, this time in New York. Let me know what you thought of this format. Is this kind of historical content interesting to you? Would you like me to talk more about PSG history beyond the Qatari era, the glorious 90s, the club creation in the 70s, the first titles in the 80s, and the darker years in the 2000s under colony capital? Let me know in the comments what pre-Qatar PSG moments you know and remember as defining moments for the club. And as always, please subscribe to the channel for more content. And don't forget, ici c'est Paris!